but to warn you, you're doomed to stay. Go.
Yeah, hey, stop. I think it was paranormal. Well, welcome everybody to Points of Interest. I'm your host, Josh. And we got another exciting show for you tonight. We got John Tobin coming on the show through Skype. He's going to be talking to us about his show, some of the projects he's been working on, and kind of giving us a little bit of an insight about who he is and what he's all about. If you guys don't know who he is, you ought to look him up online because there's a lot of information on him. He's been in the field for well over 20 years, and so he definitely has his share of experience. He also hosts his own show called Keeping the Spirits Alive. I think it's on the A1B radio network. You'll just have to look that up to find it. And he does a lot of different work all over the place, but one of the things that really sticks with me about him is that he does something that kind of, I guess you call it, preserves the haunt. What that means is that he books a lot of public events and fundraisers for different historical locations to help raise money to keep those locations in good condition and functioning so people can still come out and enjoy them and learn about the history and learn, about the past in those areas, which, as you know, in the paranormal field, that's a very important factor. Ghost Wolf, John Tobin, rock on. Absolutely. So we're going to be getting him in just a minute. We're going to call him. Before we start, though, I want to point out, Tippa Online, we do have 2 events posted right now coming up. Our first event that we have is for next Wednesday night at the infamous Fear Factory. It's a place that I've investigated many a times before in the past. There are still things that completely stump me that I haven't figured out, and I'm just waiting for somebody to come in and actually debunk it for me, logically, not just making shit up. And then after that, on the 19th, we actually have an event we're calling Day of Paranormal, which we're going to start at 5 o'clock, and we're going to be doing a meet and greet at a Cafino Coffee Shop, which is on 3300 South and about 300 West, roughly, on the north side of the street. It's an open door. Anybody and everybody's welcome to come. It's not going to cost anything. It's a great opportunity to meet up with other people with the same passion and desires that you're in, and share stories and not feel like you're crazy, because nobody's going to judge you that way there. Unless you actually are crazy, and then that's a different story altogether. But we won't go into that. But then after that, that's going to be from 5 to 6:30. Then after that, we're going to kind of break and let everybody run home, grab their stuff, whatnot. Then we're going to all drive out to Santaquin to investigate another infamous location, Leslie's Family Tree Restaurant. This is a place we've been to many times. Experiences out the wazoo. I think about everybody has at least an experience there every time they go. If not, somebody has a story to share about what they encountered. Really interesting. But the cool thing is that before we actually investigate there, they're going to feed us. Now, for this event, there is a $40 fee to investigate, to get fed, and we also have a special little surprise for our guests. So it's something you don't want to miss, and it's going to help out a great deal, not only for Tippa Online, but it's going to help out the family tree, and it's going to give you an experience that hopefully you'll walk away with and remember for a long time. So with all that spouting and everything going on, I'll kind of give you guys the details in about another hour. But we're going to get John on the show right now, and we're going to learn about him and some of his upcoming events and go from there. So hang on. This is Josh hiding over here. So I kind of gave a little bit of an idea about who you are, what you're all about. I was kind of reading your bio on the webpage IMDb, But for people who aren't aware of who John Tobin is, can you give us a little bit of a background on you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess it depends how far you want to go back, but let's just say that the paranormal has been a part of my life since I was a small child, in one way or another. I've had odd experiences since I was a little kid, and I've dealt with a lot of premonitions that I had as a child that affected me, and had some astral projection experiences when I was a child that really propelled my interest into the paranormal. Once I figured out that stuff wasn't normal per se. So once I made a connection into the paranormal, so that's kind of where it started for me, and it's driven me with my love of history. Made that connection between history and the paranormal, and kind of try to tie them together with raising awareness for history through use of the paranormal, another thing that we love. So, and I'm the host of a couple of radio shows and doing some movie things and run a lot of events, and that's that's a 30-second roundup of who I am.
Wow, that was 30 seconds. You kind of breezed by your shows a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your shows and where people can go and watch them or listen to them.
Sure. There's two shows. They both air on Monday nights. The first one is called The John Tobin Show, for lack of creativity, I guess. It would be stupid if I called it The Bob Smith Show, because there's nobody on it named Bob Smith, so I went with The John Tobin Show.
Well, you could just tell everybody it's paranormal.
No, that's true. But The John Tobin Show actually is sometimes paranormal, but most of the time it's news, pop culture, entertainment. It kind of has a lot of different things that I cover on that show. And then that's at 7 o'clock Eastern on Monday nights, so I guess that would be like 5 o'clock where you guys are. And right following that is Keeping the Spirits Alive with my co-host Chip Reichenthal. That show is a fun show that focuses on the paranormal. We'll have different guests on every week, and it's been going strong for a while now. You can hear both of those shows actually on the A1B radio network, which is mya1b.com on Monday nights, and you can subscribe to both of those on iTunes as well. So the John Tobin Show or Keeping the Spirits Alive, both available on iTunes. And we, Keeping the Spirits Alive is something that kind of came to me as a kind of a saying, kind of just sums up the message I try to send out there, which is really keeping the spirit of history and the paranormal and combining them together. That was like the perfect statement to kind of sum it up. So we went with that for the name of the show, and it's sort of been a theme. So we do try to have historical places on from time to time, and kind of remind people of our past.
Absolutely. And the fact that you do that you go out and try to hold events and raise funds for these locations is really cool, because I don't know about where you live, but I know where I am. A lot of the historical places tend to just get long forgotten about, and people don't even think about them anymore.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and that's really sad, and that's exactly what my mission really is to raise awareness for locations like that, to do whatever I can to help them out. One thing I try to always do is when I go to some place and I want to help them, I don't always go in letting them know that I'm involved in the paranormal at first. I'm sure you guys have had experiences like this where you'll mention to somebody that you're with paranormal researcher or investigator, what have you, and then suddenly they're like, oh, they don't want anything to do with it because they're afraid of having that, being thought of as being haunted, or they don't want that connection.
That stigma, right.
It happens a lot. So, you really have to, I've really had to find unique and creative ways to try to reach out to these places so that you can kind of build that relationship and build that trust. And then it's a lot easier if the paranormal side to it comes in. Some of our fundraisers aren't really, aren't involving investigations at all because of the location, them not wanting to be associated in that way. But that's all right. If they let us help them and get the word out there about them, that's fine. It's really more about that than it is really about having to do our research there. We'll always find places for that. But, when we can combine the two, it works out really, really well, because people will come out to the events and they'll have a good time. They'll have fun. They may have some experiences. But when they walk away, the number one thing for me is they've learned something about that location that they might not have known before, maybe a little bit about the history, or maybe they'll want to come back to it if it's a museum or whatever. They may want to come back, for a regular visit at some point. So it's all about awareness and getting people out to places they wouldn't normally get to go to, and having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one location right now that comes to mind here locally. I don't know if you've ever been to the Salt Lake area before or not, but there's a place called Camp Floyd, which um, you're a history buff, so you probably heard about the Mormon Wars that never actually happened.
Right?
There's a place called Camp Floyd where 2/3 of the U.S. military was stationed, gearing up, getting ready for the Mormon Wars, and then they were actually called away once the Civil War hit, and so all the soldiers had to go and fight in the Civil War instead. But Camp Floyd was the spot where all the soldiers were stationed before they got sent out to the Civil War. And also, there's a building there called the Stagecoach Inn, which was one of the main stopping points for the Pony Express.
Mm.
And it's all right there in one section. And from Salt Lake, it's probably about a 45, 50-minute drive. And it's
Right.
kind of like out in the middle of nowhere, so it doesn't really get a whole lot of visitors. But they do a lot of different things like reenactments, a lot of historical information. They do digs where they show how people uncover hidden treasures that have been buried for however long. But when we did an investigation out there, I was talking to them, and they're actually interested in us doing some broadcasts, not necessarily of the paranormal aspect, but of the historical aspect. So we told them that we'd be fully on board to go out there and just kind of broadcast some of their historical events that they host there, just to help them out and just to bring a little bit more awareness, like you said, and maybe get some more people to go out there and pay to experience it themselves.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. As you said, and just making more awareness is part of the thing. People will go out there when you do an investigation event or you hold an event with some guests or what have you, and they come out and then they realize how much they didn't even realize how much they really appreciated the history and liked the building itself, and then they end up coming back there for the regular historical tour or what have you, and that's kind of the cool thing. People sometimes don't even realize. Sometimes people think history and they think, oh, that's boring. I did that in school, and I'm not really, And then they start learning stuff when they experience that, when they're at the place, at the location,
Right.
and they start realizing, wow, this really is interesting. This is cool. I didn't know that this happened here. This is right, in my backyard, and I had no idea. So that's kind of the cool stuff that people tend to. I think it's one of those funny things. People tend to really like history. They just don't realize they like history. you know.
Well, for me, I'm more of a hands-on kind of person. If I sit and I'm told to read this book and learn this book, I won't remember anything out of the book. But you put me in an area where they say, okay, right here, this took place, I'm going to absorb that information so much better because I'm there. I'm where it actually happened. I'm, not necessarily experiencing it, but that's almost like this is sacred ground. This is history right here where I'm standing.
Right.
For me, that sticks to me a lot more than trying to read something out of books and things like that. But
Exactly. Yeah, I'm the same way, and I think that when people have these experiences, when they start realizing that, they realize that history really isn't boring. It's fun, but it's more fun when it's interactive, when you're there, And I agree with you 100%. I wasn't. I ironically enough, history was probably one of the only subjects in school I did really well in. But a lot of people that I know who really appreciate it now didn't do. They didn't care about it much in school with the books and that. But it really is. It's like you can relive history just by spending time at some of these great places, and you learn a lot about. What's funny is you learn a lot about history with paranormal investigating. That's why I put the two together, because if you go to certain locations enough times, you can start building that puzzle a little bit. You start getting the same voices sometimes, or the same things on your photos, or you get names, but it's the same names. You do your research, you can kind of sometimes put a little bit of a connection together there, and that makes it even cooler when you may be having a connection with somebody that actually either lived at that location or worked there or spent a lot of time there, what have you. It's like retelling the historical stories through our paranormal research. It's a really cool thing. Hello?
That's awesome that you put those two such a great light, and you're helping preserve that history too. That's just so awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that's definitely what it's all about, preserving that. I'm afraid that if we ever forgot about these things, that, where do we go? Where's our future if we don't remember our past? And really is, the past is the doorway to the future. And people,
Exactly.
are starting to really, catch on to that. And it's great. It's great to see people really taking an interest.
Well, it also helps us from reliving history and as far as making the same mistakes again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's an excellent point. You learn from our mistakes. So, sometimes when we do our investigating, we'll put pieces together from even EVPs we get, a little stories. Sometimes you hear really sad things, and you kind of put the stories together from the locations, and you learn. You can learn from that even, just from what you're getting in your evidence. Occasionally we're like, wow, it was really awful, some of these things that happened here. I'm glad that we have at least, as messed up as our society is today, we've at least learned from some of these things and gotten past a lot of the different barriers that used to be out there. So yeah, it's very cool.
Absolutely. Now, in our chat room, we have a gentleman. He's actually the host of our Wednesday night show. His called Ghost Wolf J. He actually had a question for you. He wanted to know what your most profound experience was.
Oh man, that's a good question. I'd have to say for me, my most profound experience probably happened in my early 20s when I saw, for the first time and only time to this date, a full-bodied apparition. And that's really what propelled me. So if that experience hadn't happened, I was already casually investigating and researching, but I wasn't really putting full time into it like I do now. And what happened in short was I was living with my ex-wife in a house out in Massachusetts, and we'd been out at a concert and came home, and we were coming upstairs, and my stepdaughter, I kept getting out of bed, and I kept telling her, go back to bed, and she just kept getting up every 5 minutes and go to the bathroom or come out and say something, and it was getting a little annoying. So, I remembered I left something out in my car, so I said, all right, I'll be right back. I gotta go get whatever it was I forgot in the car, and I went out to the car and came back upstairs, and as I opened the door to the kitchen and I walk into the house, I see my stepdaughter. I thought, get out of bed, and I'm going to say, are you kidding me? You need to go back to bed. How many times are you going to get up? And as soon as I got through that part of my sentence, I realized standing in front of me was a girl that didn't look anything like my stepdaughter, with long brown hair and period white type dress, and a big smile on her face. And as I kind of shook my head to say, kind of get a grip into what I was looking at, she just sort of evaporated right in front of my eyes and disappeared. And from that day forward, the obsession with this whole thing has really gone full force. And that was an experience that my heart started racing. I started pounding. I ran into the other room. I told everybody I could what I just saw. Of course, they all thought I was full of crap. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what had just happened. And we had several experiences in this house that kind of tie in with the little girl's energy being left behind in that house. So, that just sort of backed that all up for me, and it really put me into the position where that's what I knew, what I really wanted to do.
That's awesome. So I saw on your website also that you were into astral projection as a child as well in your growing up years. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. This is a thing that was I had it took me the longest time. It took me up until just this past year, really, to start talking about this. This is something that I only ever brought up before to my brother, and it's because I thought, until a few years ago, I honestly thought that when I was a child, I could fly around my house, which sounds completely crazy because I didn't really know, what it was. Weird feedback here, but anyway.
Yeah, we were picking it up a little bit too. I think I got it though.
All right, there you go. Got it. Yep. So I didn't, for the longest time, what would happen was I had a not a happy childhood. I mean, my childhood was really bad. And without getting into too much detail, it was a lot of abuse and a lot of really bad situations. And I would always just go away to my room to escape from this. And I would lay down on my bed, and after a little while, and I couldn't do this on command, but every now and then I would feel myself come out of my body do what I would call flying. That's exactly what it felt like. I would literally put my arms out and I could fly above my body. I could look down at myself. I could fly around the house. I could see everybody in my house. I could hear the conversations. I could see the things they were doing. I could even go outside of my house, but I could never leave the perimeter of my yard. And I don't know if that was a thing because I was told, you can't leave the yard as a kid. I don't know, but I could hear these things, and I would recall these conversations. Later on in the day, I would be like, "Why did you say this?" or "Why did you do this?" And you're like, "How did you know that?" They would be whispering things and saying things that I would never be able to pick up on, and I would recite full conversations, and I just got, go away, and you didn't hear that, and what are you doing? Stay in your room, and blah blah blah, and all this other stuff. And for the longest time, I had no idea what it was. I just thought, oh, I guess everybody does this. I didn't have any idea that people didn't that everybody did this. And I think it was many years later when I was watching some show, I want to say it was probably In Search Of, or one of those shows, and they had something on there about astral projection. And I was like, holy crap, this is exactly what happened to me when I was a kid. This is what I used to be able to do. And I've spent time and time again trying to be able to recreate these experiences that I had as a child, but I've never been able to do it. It stopped probably when I was around 9 or 10 years old, and but I literally had done it hundreds of times, and I'm not sure what the correlation is and why it stopped necessarily, other than maybe I moved on to a different stage in my mental development at that point. I'm not sure, but it was crazy. The long version of the story was there was a man that I would see whenever I would do these astral projections. He would sort of stand in the corner and kind of watch me and smile. And short version of the long story was I ended up meeting this man, 25 years later, and becoming friends with him and finding out a little bit about who he was, which tied into my history. Again, the history all comes around full circle for me. So for my personal history, I had to do a lot of soul searching and learning about why some of this stuff happened to me, and I'm still researching this. The premonitions I had as a kid kind of tied into that too. I'm researching this now, trying to figure out and make these connections. So hopefully one day my personal research will pay off, and I'll be able to fully understand why these things happened to me. But for whatever reason, they did, and here I am, completely engulfed in this paranormal world, trying to figure it all out, like we all are,
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is something that a lot of people have experienced is as children, we were always told, it's in your head, you're imagining things, quit making stuff up.
Yeah, too many parameters are put on, innocent little children that refrain from being able to experience the true experience that they're having. Instead, we're told, like Josh was saying, it's all in our head.
And, being programmed that way, because I remember when I was a kid, I wouldn't necessarily say I had those dreams of flying. It was just more like floating around my bedroom. And it was like weightlessness, just kind of bouncing off the walls like I was in space. And, when I would tell people, oh, you were just dreaming, oh, it was just this, oh, it was just that, people tend to, when they start getting older, they start believing that and understanding that that's how it is. It was just in my head, so they start shutting off those abilities.
Right.
But now, the paranormal awareness is, for lack of a better term, with all the TV shows, with more and more people talking, with all the teams that are forming all over the country, all over the globe, really, the awareness and the acceptance of paranormal in everyday life, it has increased quite a bit, which I kind of think is a double-edged sword. And what I mean by that is it's allowing people that are having experiences or they're in bad situations, they're going to be able to open up and look for help easier now because it's more accepted. But at the same time, you got people that go out and they for lack of a better way of saying it, they hurt the paranormal field because they disrespect the locations they go to. They don't really have the knowledge or the ability to help people, but they claim they do. And it has its pros and its cons, but what I was getting to was the fact of now that we're more accepting of the paranormal field, the way we talk with our children, because I have a 5-year-old now, and the way we interact with our children, and when they come to us with stories and things like that, now I tend to hesitate in saying, oh, it's all in your head, but at the same time, I don't want to reinforce, yeah, what you saw last night was a shadow in your bedroom.
Right.
And so it kind of puts me in a very fine line as far as how do I handle a conversation with my child when he thinks he's either experiencing an ability or experiencing something that's possibly paranormal.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It is a double-edged sword. My son's 14, and he grew up in that house that I mentioned before where I saw the apparition. And he's actually had experiences that I would define as paranormal just because I was involved in those experiences and I know what they consisted of. And it's sort of weird because when you grow up in that environment, I think you tend to be less afraid of it. But because I learned from what had happened to me, I was very cautious to not tell him, to kind of say, oh, you're just imagining that. I never really had that with him. I just sort of discussed what he saw and let him know not to be afraid and that Dad was here and he was okay. And, and at this point, he loves the paranormal stuff too. And I think he's never been afraid of it because of given that basic understanding, even as a smaller child, and not having to think that he was just imagining stuff, which is what we all were told. But it's a fine line. And at what age do you don't want your kids to be scared? You certainly don't want them to think that shadow figures are roaming around your house. And, so yeah, it's a tough one. And I think to back up a little bit to what your point was before about the, how open and how easy it is now for people to speak about the paranormal because of the shows and the radio shows and the discussion groups and teams. The double-edged sword there too. And I think what you were saying is, for all the people that are sincere about this and that are learning and that want to teach and share and engage in all this stuff, there's so many other people out there that are either thrill seekers who probably should just be doing things like going with groups like mine and coming out to our events because they don't have the knowledge or the ability or they don't want to help or these things, but they want to have the experiences, which is cool and fine, but they shouldn't necessarily be going into people's houses on their own or historical locations and things like that. And same token, there's people that, because things like astral projection and premonitions and psychics and things like that are such a commonplace now, there's so many people that just want to do these things. They don't even necessarily have these experiences, but they want to so badly that suddenly they've become self-proclaimed experts on these matters, and now they're having these experiences because they say they did. So it's a double-edged sword all the way around.
Now, another thing I was thinking about the other day, and forgive me, I have ADD, so my mind goes everywhere all at once.
I'm with you on that one.
But one of the things I was thinking the other day is that some people, they want to believe they have an ability so much, a psyche ability, intuitive, whatever. And I was wondering, do people actually learn how to read other people? So they may not be actually doing a psychic reading, but they're just reading how the person sits, how they look, how they're dressed, how they interact, and kind of start piecing a story together that way, but misinterpreting that as being a psychic ability.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, you've seen gallery readings, right? So
Yeah.
a gallery reading, but most psychics that have been doing it for a long time, if they're completely honest, will tell you that they're reading the person more so much than necessarily connecting. They can't look. It's almost impossible for a psychic if they have an on-off switch and to really tune into everybody's loved ones on command. It's like, you can't go to a haunted location and get an EVP on demand. You can just say, okay, speak to me right now, and then boom, they do all the time. It doesn't work that way. That'd be great if it did, but it doesn't. So, I think that there's a lot of intuition, or there's a lot of people that are really good at reading other people, but it is not necessarily psychic and or paranormal. And there's other people that are truly gifted and have abilities that are hard to explain, but I think those people are certainly few and far between, and not like every other person that we meet these days that says that they're psychic and, your Uncle Charlie, says you should have a sandwich or whatever, So
Yeah.
So on that same topic, do you think that these people that are out there in the investigative field can conjure up activity by claiming that they sense the spirits there, or they can see the actual, apparitions or shadow masses. Do you think that they could actually be a catalyst for activity?
I don't know so much of a catalyst, but I do believe that the human mind is a very powerful tool, and that if somebody is suggesting that they see a spirit in the corner, or somebody is suggesting that they have seen this or hear something, or people start playing into that. For right or for wrong, whether the person is really sensing this stuff or not, people will buy into that, and I see it happen all the time. I've done it before. I've been like, really, and then I'll start hearing and sensing these things, or my perception will change. So I think the mind is very, very powerful, and what we say and hear, can lead us down one road or another. So do I think it really is conjuring up paranormal activity? No, but the perception of paranormal activity can certainly be conjured up by what someone senses or says they sense. Whether or not they're really sensing this again, the only person that really knows that, I suppose, is the person that's claiming it. So, but I believe that we sometimes, as people, conjure up, for lack of a better term, our own paranormal activity when we really want something to happen. We can kind of not make it happen, but we can. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that people are not experiencing these things or faking it in any way. I'm just saying that the perception changes when something is painted in your mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does actually. Psychology behind it is kind of a vast field that needs to be researched more, I think, as far as the paranormal tie-in. Because as you said, one person's perception can heighten the perception of everybody that's in the room with them.
Exactly. And it happens a lot. You try to keep your mind open and clear, but someone is insisting on these sort of things are happening. Then you start, it almost takes you away from maybe what your original goal was when you went to that location. Then you just start automatically looking for or trying to listen for the things that this person is saying, because you want to have that experience too. We all do. We all want to be able to have these great experiences and record them and learn from them. But sometimes, that's. I've worked with many psychics and mediums, and I'm very picky about who I will work with. I have to really have a personal trust for the person because of that. And I'm still very skeptical on the whole thing. A lot of times, I'd like to go in and I ask for the psychic, if you want to write things down and we'll compare notes later, that's the best way to do it. Don't tell me out loud, because you're going to influence myself, or somebody on my team is going to be influenced by what you're saying, because you're a credible person to us. We believe you. And it's more credible to me if the psychic writes down their information or records it in some way, and then after we're reviewing our what we've caught and comparing our notes and the things that I might have sensed or picked up on, and then you can connect that together, and it makes sense, and you picked up on the same things. That's a heck of a lot more exciting and interesting of a find than just somebody spouting out what they may happen to see right then and there.
Yeah, and a lot more credible too.
Yeah,
I would think.
exactly.
So yeah, that's kind of how we roll when we work on the psychic part of it. Be a great note taker. Keep your yapper shut.
Yep.
And let everybody discover what there is to discover, and then compare notes later.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the best way to do it. That way you're not tainting. It's too like we said, it's too easy to do. Not even intentionally. It just happens. And if you really want to stay away from that, then that's the best way to do it.
Now, hey, John, I'm sure you've probably done your share of residential cases trying to go in and help families out. What are some of the techniques you use when you're interviewing a client for a possible investigation? What are some of the questions you ask and some of the things you look for when you're talking with them?
Well, I got to tell you, since we started Glory Haunt Hounds a couple of years ago, I haven't done residentials anymore, and that's simply because I just don't have the time to do it the right way. To do a residential the right way, it takes, it could take anywhere from a month to a year, depending on the severity of the case and what's happening. So because we're doing these events every month, and we're really engulfed into the history and the historical locations, I haven't done the residentials in a while. That said, of course, I have done many in the past when I was doing independent research and when I was working with a team previous. You know, the last time I helped out, I did help out a residential this year or late last year with another team, and it's funny because they hadn't done very many, and I was helping them on their specifically interview process for this. And I think a lot of the questions that are most important are the ones that most people, I think, are probably not asking because they're the most difficult ones. You need to ask things about like the medical history, medications that somebody may be taking. You need to find out, you know, how many people have had these experiences. You need to try to track down as many of those people as you humanly can, even if you can't see them all in person, by phone or email or any way to ask the same questions. You need to correlate all these notes. But I think one of the most important things is asking those difficult questions. And it's difficult when you're in somebody's house and they don't really know you and you're asking them about their medical history because it's very personal.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but in all actuality, this is really important stuff. And someone said, "What do you?" They asked me one time, "What do you think? Do you think I'm a druggie? Do you think I'm a drug user?" I'm like, "No, not at all." But the fact of the matter is that some of these medications aren't. I'm not telling you the medication is making you have this experience, but it can heighten these experiences, and it's important to know. For me to know what medicines they are, so I know what kinds of effects those have on the brain, so that I can kind of perceive why these experiences are so much more intense for you than they are, say, for your brother who has these experiences, but not to the same level. So we can try to find the answers that way. I think if you explain it well enough, they will be more open to giving that information. But I think that's the most difficult thing, and I think that there's a lot of teams out there that completely avoid any of those personal questions that are really so vital to a proper investigation.
Yeah, I've came across scenarios where, you know, they're willing to let you in their house and, you know, shut off all lights and wander around for hours in the dark talking to yourself, but they don't want to tell you that, yeah, my dad was a schizophrenic.
Right.
You know, and so sometimes it's hard to really narrow it down to, okay, what's actually happening? Another thing that I've came across, and tell me if you have too, back when you were doing it, is sometimes when you're able to explain the logical things that took place for an event to happen, like one that comes to my mind is a client told me that their bedroom door would slam shut in the middle of the night, and I walked into their house and kicked on their furnace, and they had a vent right behind the door when the door swung open. So as soon as I kicked on that furnace, it blew that door shut. And even though I was able to show them this, take a look at this and see what's going on, they still refused to believe that was a possibility.
Yep.
And so sometimes I found that it's harder to convince people that they may not necessarily be dealing with a paranormal, but something that is at least worth looking at.
Right. Well, let's be honest, though, right? Part of the problem is going back to what we talked about before. Having a haunted house is cool these days, right? Everybody wants a haunted house. 20 years ago, nobody wanted a haunted house.
Right.
If you had a haunting in your house 20 years ago, oh my God, you know, you call the Warrens, you do something, you freak out, you know, we don't want to tell anybody about this, we just want it to go away. But now everybody's like, if you go to somebody's house and you come up with 10 logical explanations for what's happening, they don't want to hear that. They just want you to tell them. In a lot of cases, they don't even want it to go away. They just want confirmation from somebody else other than themselves that something's happening there, and that's part of the problem. Here we go again with perception of what your mind is telling you. Exactly. So you watch enough TV shows and you watch enough movies and you read enough books, and suddenly you're having these experiences. This mind is a very powerful thing, and I'm not saying that all these times. You know, there's certainly many legitimate hauntings out there, but there's a lot of cases where people just so badly want a haunted house that you're right. You've explained, and they really have these things happening, like you said with the door and these creaks and different sounds. When you find, and you can even recreate these scenarios for them, and they get like angry, they get mad. You're like, no, I know what's happening. It's not that. And it's like, okay, calm down, buddy. You know, I'm just trying to help you out here.
Yeah, I've hit my head against the wall a couple of times because of conversations like that.
Well, you know, and I think you alluded to this on your website as well, that spirits are all around you all the time. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you don't necessarily need to go to any one given haunted location to experience an interaction with spirit.
Yeah, absolutely that, and the fact that I'm of the belief that spiritual energy isn't necessarily that of a deceased person. Even I believe that. Let me explain. I believe that most of the energies we're connecting with as investigators and researchers, with the types of tools that we use, is energy that's been left behind by anybody. Could be energy in this room tonight. Any place where there's been an energy's been left behind, where there's been a profound effect in life, resonates and leaves energy behind. It's more powerful depending on what the situation in life was, and depending how much energy was there in the room to begin with. So I think that there are some gifted people that can communicate with the spirit world, but I believe that kind of communication kind of comes to us sometimes in our investigations coincidentally, other than with the tools we're using. In other words, we may get great EVPs, and that could either be the energy that I'm speaking of, or it could be a deceased person. It's really hard to tell. I don't think it's possible to necessarily distinguish the difference between the two sometimes. But what I'm saying, what I'm really getting at here is that yes, energy, spirits, and ghosts, spirits, whatever terminology you want to use, it surrounds us all the time. And again, it's not necessarily deceased people. It's just the energy of anything that's been around before we were here, and it resonates. And sometimes it's more active. What the things we should be wanting to know is, why is it that it comes out more than at some places than other places, and different times, different scenarios, or to different people? Why do some people have these experiences and others have none? Those are the more interesting things to me than to try to figure out necessarily scientifically exactly what it is we're dealing with. We know we're dealing with something that's on a different plane or a different level than a normal level. It's paranormal. But yeah, that energy resonates everywhere. So you don't have to go to, here's a good example. You go to a great place that you've heard a lot about, and you've heard about the legend of the ghost of Joe, the guy that was shot in the hallway. And so you spend your whole night trying to communicate with Joe. But meanwhile, the other 2,000, the other 20,000 people that have been at this hotel or wherever would love to communicate with you, but because you've only asked for Joe all night long, you've missed out on all these potential experiences that you could be having and this research you could be doing. So
Exactly.
Where that perception kicks in again. So people just need to open their minds, I think, a little bit more to the possibility of, we don't need to focus so much on this ghost story. Let's live our own lives and have our own experiences without being handcuffed by someone else's experience.
I'm really glad you explained that, because it made me think back to one of the investigations that I did a couple years ago, where there was an enormous amount of energy in the house after we had located an object, and it was a place where there was a horrific murder that took place. And the gentleman who committed the crime is actually still alive, but he's in prison. But now that you explained that, it seems like it was the energy he left behind in that house is what we were dealing with. Does that make sense at all?
No, it totally does make sense, and that's that's a great a great example. How about a situation where there was like a tremendous a riot, very energy, or maybe here's a good scenario of something that I've been told about a lot. The Boston Garden out here, I've never been there. I've never been there after it's been closed. I've been there many times, but I've never been there to investigate or after it's been closed. But I've had people that work there at night, a couple of security people that I know, tell me stories of all these. They can hear like crowd noise, and they can hear people talking and the shuffling. And nobody has ever been reported to have died in the building.
Right.
Who knows what happened there before it was that building, but they can hear all this stuff that they classify as being they suspect it to be paranormal. But there's been so much energy, the Bruins and the Celtics and the concerts and everything that has been there. That energy where does it go? It doesn't just evaporate. When there's that much energy in a location, it lingers, and sometimes it can come out and communicate. And sometimes the stranger part of this is occasionally it communicates at a level that seems to be very intelligent. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm really fascinated with, trying to figure out why that all works and how it works, and developing on that. But I will, I try to do different little experiments to try to connect with these things and put the stories together. But yeah, I mean, that's a great example of what you said there. this energy that gets left behind, and the person's very much alive. I've had, you know, I believe to have had communication with people that are still alive on a paranormal level. So that's just my belief, but I'm working to try to hopefully distinguish the two different types of energy. And I don't mean intelligent residual. I mean deceased spirit energy and energy left behind from the living. So it's unusual. They're very close and hard to distinguish.
Absolutely, and on top of that, if you kind of look at a lot of businesses where people go work 10-hour shifts, they spend more of their life at work than they do at home. I'm sure they deal with a lot of those highly emotional type scenarios at work quite often, especially if they're constantly being threatened to lose their job. They're working in an unsafe environment, things like that. And so I could see how a lot of imprints are left behind anywhere: hospitals, workplaces, hospice locations. Just about anywhere you go, certain people will be able to pick up on things that,
Yeah, every living thing leaves behind residual energy, whether it be a tree, a human, or, animal. So some people are more sensitive to picking up on those energies, and you're right. The scientific distinction between, a deceased loved one and, a living energy, of someone that's still alive, would probably, if you were able to discover that, you'd open up a whole new branch in the paranormal, because, that really actually boggles my mind too.
Like, we need more branches in the paranormal.
Yeah, well, I figure we already got a massive tree, right?
So John, what's your opinion on aliens and UFOs and such?
My opinion, it's funny that you say that. Aliens and UFOs have something that I've always had an interest in, but I will be the first person to admit that I'm not the most knowledgeable in that area, but I'm fascinated by it. So, what I'd like to do when I want to learn more is I'll just bring people onto my radio show that are actually, and I can ask them all these questions. And I've had like an obsession with sort of, I guess you can kind of connect it to the conspiracy stuff too, like Area 51 and secret government bases. I talked to a great author named Mac, what's his name? Mac Malloy, a couple months ago on one of my shows, and he wrote a book all about Behind Area 50, or Beyond Area 51 is this book, and it's all about secret government bases all around the world, that the world has these places, and what is possibly really happening here. Most of them probably just testing secret military missions and things of that nature. But I've always one of these. I've always had this thing, like when people don't want you to know something, I really, it's like this thing you have when you're a kid. If someone says you can't do something, of course you want to do it. So
Yep.
When I hear the government covering up these stuff and they don't want you to know and hear this, I think it's got to be more than just testing aircraft, because they could just say that we're testing aircraft. We don't want other government to know. We don't want government, or we're just thinking, But they're denying the existence of that it even was there when people could see it. It was on aerial maps. It was literally, when we're looking at it, how can you say it's not there? That's what puts the shrouds the mystery for me and things like that. But yeah, I think we would be silly and foolish, honestly, to think that why would we think we were the only living species in this universe? It would be naive to think that we're the only people, necessarily people, the only living beings out there in the universe. In the same frame, time travel is an interesting thing that's being talked about a lot now too, right? Are we, that raise those questions, like, are we living now, or are there people that are living 1,000 years? Is that already happened? Does the future already happen? Is the past coming back? Does it all go full circle at some point? All this stuff is really fascinating, and stuff I'm just starting to learn about now. But I have a huge open mind and think that all of these things are possible. I just don't know. Just like all of us, we're trying to learn. We don't know how they connect and to make sense of it all. But yeah, I think I'd go so far as to say that I wouldn't be shocked at one bit if there were, aliens, for lack of a better term, living with us right here on Earth now. who's to say?
There's another branch to the tree. Maybe some of the spirits we deal with on a regular basis are alien spirits. One of the things that science, from a science point of view, they look at every living thing on the planet as a carbon base. Is carbon based, and so they're saying anything from trees to insects to animals to everything. There's a carbon print of everything that's alive, and so that's all they recognize as living. But what if that wasn't actually the case, and there's other types of life that we are either just incapable of seeing, incapable of experiencing, but they're actually living on another, I don't want to use the word plane or a realm or anything like that, but they're living a completely different
existence,
world, existence than we are. And what if they're actually trying to communicate with us and we're interpreting those as spirits?
Yeah,
that's
an interesting theory.
I run theories all the time, but they kind of come and go. Once again, my ADD is all over. But what are some of the? Have you tried some, like experiments through the years? Some different things you've brought to the table that you hadn't seen before, and you either found success or didn't find success with them?
Well, there's two things that I like to do a lot that I don't claim at all to be the person that came up with these at all. I'm sure they've been done many times, but I don't see them a lot on the investigations I've been on, and I don't hear it talked about often. So, two things that I like to do. One is with EVP, and it involves locations that I've been to multiple times. What I try to do, if I catch EVPs of the same voices more than 2 or 3 times, I'll record those EVPs, and then I will actually bring them with me back to the same location, and I will play back those voices and record at the same time and try to see if I can get reaction from the voices that were at the location itself. So, for instance, if I've got a EVP voice or an EVP that says, "Hey, this is Joe," I'll come back to the place and I'll play, "Hey, this is Joe," while I'm recording and then listening back, trying to see if I'm getting a reaction from the actual voice. Maybe Joe is going to react to his own voice or somebody that knows him at that location. So that's one of the things that I like to try to do. Sometimes you have success with it, and sometimes nothing. So, but occasionally I've got a response. I've had a location where they call me by my first and last name, and I'll play that recording back, and then they'll repeat the same thing that they just said on a voice that wasn't on the original recording. So it's kind of like going back and forth saying my name kind of gives me a little bit of a cool, that makes me, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, they're all talking about me. That's cool.
That's actually a cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do that. And then the other thing is the variation. Everybody does the flashlight thing now, and we're all very kind of like, oh, I'm kind of on the fence on it. Sometimes it's way too coincidental for me, really. But, when you're doing an event, I'll be honest, when you're doing an event and if it's slow, you generally can get responses on it and people think it's cool, so we go with it. Is it paranormal? I'm not going to tell you it's paranormal, but I'm not going to tell you it absolutely isn't either. So, but so I like to do on it to kind of play with it is, and I started really working on this at Rolling Hills Asylum out here a few weeks back or a month ago or so, where I will do different things with this flashlight. I like to play hide and seek quite a bit. And not in my normal life. I used to.
You're hiding it further.
I just want to clarify. I'm not just like a big. I'm really into hide and seek.
You hide from the ghost, and they gotta come find you.
So I will set the flashlights up, and then I will hide somewhere, and I will ask questions, or have somebody else in the room ask questions. If John is behind the table, turn the light on. If John is behind the bookcase, turn the light on. If John's behind the piano, turn the light on. And then if it's happening, then I'll throw it out and move on to the next thing. But we had a lot of times I have these things where I'll be like, all right, John is in the hallway, turn the light on, light will go on, and immediately when it's asked where I am, and then I'll move somewhere else. And it happened 4, 5, 6 times in a row on that, and that to me was way more interesting than if you're in the room with us, turn the light on. So that had a little bit more validity to it. Why would it only come on exactly when it got to the point where it asked where I was? And then other things I would do is I'll sing famous songs, like we were singing children's songs, like Christmas songs and things like that, and then stopping at certain parts in the song and having the light come on for the next word. like we did Jingle Bells when it comes to part a one horse open sleigh, and then stop, and then hey, and the light would come on. We did it several different times that way. So experimenting with some of the tools in ways like that. Again, I'm not claiming that that's the most original thing ever, but for me, anybody can put two flashlights up on a thing and do a yes or no, and watch that flashlight slowly go off after a minute and a half of that no. There you go, it said no.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but like I said, there's, in my opinion, there's a time and a place for that, but it puts a little bit more validity to the research you're doing, and at least opens the possibility that this may be paranormal now, and when it's that interactive on not just a yes or no coincidental level.
Exactly. And, I'm pretty well known for playing with flashlights. And, I always tell everybody, especially when I hold, like, public events, things like that, I always tell them right out of the gate, you may see the lights turn off and on, and that does not necessarily mean it's paranormal. And, sometimes I've been able to carry on conversations with a flashlight for 45 minutes, requesting it to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees while we're monitoring it. And, like you said, there's times where, it's a little bit too interesting for me to completely disregard. But
Right.
even at those times, I'm not going to throw my hands up and say, yep, we got a ghost in here. Let's roll. I think I'm probably one of the hardest people to convince because I normally like 3 points of interest in place before I'll call a place, active.
Right.
And that happens few and far between. Now, if a table slides across a room, that's different. If a plate comes out of a cupboard and hovers in the kitchen and then shoots into the bedroom, that's a little bit different. But,
yeah. And think like, something's going on here.
Yeah, but I mean, just catching a whisper on an EVP, just because a light turns on, just because a K2 bounces around, a lot of the equipment that we use it's more past tense than now, but a lot of the equipment that was used in the paranormal wasn't designed for the paranormal. A K2 was designed for an electrician. A flashlight was obviously designed so you could see where you're going in the dark. Audio recorders were for dictation and getting somebody in trouble for saying the wrong thing.
Right.
And we've just implemented a lot of those tools and started using it towards the paranormal field. But since then, there's a lot of people that are coming out with new equipment, new designs. But honestly, I think they're still reverting back to the equipment from the earlier days. They're just kind of modifying it and tweaking it a little bit and, moving forward in that direction.
Right.
How do you feel about like the ghost box or the spirit box or the Frank's box?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was what
It was one of my ramblings. I'm sorry. How do you feel like about the ghost box or the spirit box or any of those devices that talk?
Yeah, I'm up in the air on it too. Sometimes sometimes it's a bunch of nothing, and sometimes some things happen. And here's the tools that I have no faith in whatsoever. It are tools that because I don't care how many times somebody's explained it to me, it still doesn't make sense to me, and that's when I have to throw it out. But like an Ovilus or something like that. Okay, for entertainment purposes maybe, but I don't understand, and no one's going to make me understand, just because maybe because I'm too old school, I don't know, how energy can translate itself into words. What? I don't know. I just don't get it. So sometimes it can be interesting and can make you raise your eyebrows, but I generally don't use an Ovilus for that reason because I don't understand how that could be possible. I do understand how white noise and radio waves can draw in energy because that is scientifically provable.
Right.
So a spirit box, I understand the basis of how that could work, and just the same because I have a digital audio recorder that I've got some amazing, in my opinion, amazing EVPs on before. So it's really doing the same thing. It's just bringing it to a plane that you can hear audibly instead of a frequency that you have to listen to later that your ears aren't picking up on. So for me, does it work all the time? No, but does it increase the possibility that you could get a legitimate energy or spirit energy voice on there through like a Frank's box or a spirit box? Yes. Now, Ovilus or cell phone apps and things like that, no, I'm not. I pretty much stay away from that stuff.
Yeah, I've always had a problem with like the cell phone apps you could download, like the Ghost Radar was one of the funniest ones.
What's really funny is I had somebody that I know that you actually thought the Ghost Radar was the coolest thing since sliced bread. They started using it on investigations. I'm like, are you kidding me? And then I had John Tenney on my show one time, and he actually went and debunked the whole all the cell phone apps, how they work. And I was like, thank you for finally coming out and saying that, because now I don't feel so, now I feel justified in telling them that they were an idiot for believing it.
Yeah, but they're fun to play with if you're not really taking it serious.
If you're doing it for fun, then that's fun. That's entertainment. I don't have a problem with anybody that puts out their Ghost Radar, when sitting around with their buddies on a Friday night having a couple beers, and they want a good laugh out of it. That's cool,
Yeah.
But don't say, listen, you want to connect with the ghost? We're gonna turn on the Ghost Radar made by Squid Pickles or whatever that guy's name was.
It's Spud Pickle, yeah. Well, it says right there on their
For
website too that is for
purposes
entertainment purposes
Yeah.
only. I mean, they say it right there.
Exactly. Yep. So does a Ouija board. So depending on who you ask about that, they don't believe it's for entertainment purposes. So
It's evil. It'll yeah, we've heard it all. Hey, I know we're coming up on the hour, so I just want to again thank you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on the show, talking with us, letting us pick your brain. And for anybody who's just logged in, can you just kind of tell everybody how they can listen to your shows or get in touch with you or follow you on some of your projects you're working on?
Sure. The best place for all of that information kind of rolled into one is Glory Hunt Hound's website. And some other time I'll have to come on and tell you the story about the name of that, because it's kind of an odd name. But gloryhunthounds.com have information on all the upcoming events. A couple things I want to mention is we have our Halloween party coming up on October 26th. There's information on that on there. Then I'm starting a few tour dates with my friend Chris DeCesare around the Northeast this fall. We're doing a couple of different lecture tour dates. So there's information on that there. And then my radio shows, Keeping the Spirits Alive, Monday nights at 8 Eastern and 6 Mountain. Getting good with this mountain time zone thing now.
Yeah, you are.
The John Tobin Show, which is Monday nights at 7 Eastern or 5 Mountain Time Zone on A1B, mya1b.com. Also, just want to make a quick mention. I made my motion picture debut this past weekend in a movie called Surviving Evidence, which will be doing some more screenings probably around the Northeast and maybe in different parts of the country, and then that'll be out on DVD probably early next year. And one thing I'm really looking forward to is making my acting debut, which will be out next June, a movie called The Grim Becoming, which co-stars Britt Griffith from Ghost Hunters.
Nice.
Awesome.
Devaney Penn, Bill Obrist Jr. Bill Obrist played Abe Lincoln in Abe Lincoln versus Zombies. So that movie, Grim Becoming, which is a horror comedy, and it's really, it's going to be, I'm not just saying it because I'm in it, but it's a great script. It's from a great group of people called Deftone Pictures out in Buffalo, New York, and that should be out in theaters and video on demand and that sort of thing in June. So
definitely keep us notified on that, and we'll pump the word out. And we would love to have you back when you're feeling better. I'll stay in touch with you and see if we could book a future date.
Yeah, thanks. Love to.
And I know Brett wants to say goodbye to you. Here he is.
Bye, John. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And you know what? I've heard so many cool things about Salt Lake and meeting you guys and talking to met so many friends out there now that I've got to get out there sometime, and we'll hit up some cool places out there. That'll be good.
I tell you what, you let us know, and we'll set up some really good locations for you, either public or private. We don't mind. We can keep a secret, or we could set something up. It's all good. But yeah, let us know if you ever come out this way, and we'll definitely hook you up.
Definitely, we'll do. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
Have
John.
a good
Thanks.
And have a good night.
night. Bye.
The doom to stay. Go.